Welcome, audience, to today's episode of Tech Undisrupted. Today's podcast is sponsored by AI Elevate Partners. We help IT and cybersecurity consulting companies overcome inconsistent lead flow and unpredictable revenue by leveraging AI-powered growth systems so they can consistently close more deals without increasing headcount or burning out their team. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated with their inconsistent sales results as typical. Business comes from referrals and word of mouth, leading to unpredictable sales pipelines and struggling to grow at scale. But with right strategy and support, they're able to grow their MRR by as much as 50% within a 6 to 12 month period while shortening the sales cycle. If that sounds like you or someone you know, check out our website, aielevatepartners.com, or just connect with us on LinkedIn. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today's guest is a real treat and an industry veteran, and I'm excited to welcome Saeed Gordon, CEO of DOF, and excited to dive into his background and experience and unique perspective on the IT industry and cybersecurity. So, Saeed, if you would take a moment to introduce yourself to the audience and give us a little bit of background. Perfect.
Well, Jillian, I appreciate your time today. Appreciate you allowing me to be on your platform. So, as you mentioned, I'm Saeed Gordon with DOF. You mentioned us kind of being unique, or maybe me having a unique perspective. So I followed the very common path to IT of going to law school and then deciding, of course, that instead of being an attorney, I wanted to be an IT professional. I started DOF in 2016, my last year of law school. Pretty much from my second year of law school, I figured out I did not want to practice. My goal when I went to law school was my parents having a background in entrepreneurship. They owned a small business that started, I think, in 93 and lasted until about 2007 or 2008. Unfortunately, they lost their business in the recession. But hearing my parents tell me stories about different experiences they had, the normal entrepreneur struggles, people making promises and not keeping them. And, as you go through your first year of law school, you kind of have this kind of idealized view of how the law works and how the law can be used to help somebody. Of course, it doesn't quite work that way. There are a lot of different things that make it challenging to use the law to protect you sometimes. But my goal was to use the law to help small businesses and entrepreneurs to protect themselves and to avoid some of the challenges that my parents had to deal with when they were entrepreneurs. Going to Vanderbilt, I realized that wasn't probably going to be the way that I could move forward. It wasn't the career that I thought I could turn it into. And I pivoted from there. So we started in 2016 with a buddy of mine. We were going to build out custom software solutions to assist with the mental health challenges that we saw on campus, where a lot of my classmates were having trouble, especially during test taking time and graduation, especially trying to get access to mental health professionals on campus. Your wait times could be 3 to 4 months. By the time you get a chance to see a counselor, you're probably graduated already or going into the next semester. So it's kind of pointless. And we were never able to get that platform off the ground. And we would have probably been, I think, second in the market if we could have gotten there, second in the market to BetterHelp, which started promoting themselves kind of while we were midway in planning and development. We pivoted from there, though, and went into custom software to custom DevOps solutions. So working with customers, helping them to develop their platforms, helping them to manage or optimize their applications. And that was really what kicked us off in 2019. Through there, though, we had to adjust to COVID. My business partner ended up deciding that this wasn't for him. So through COVID, I was actually trying to figure things out on my own as a non-technical person in IT. So that was pretty scary. And then, of course, when COVID hit in March, that was 10 times scarier. And I think you figured out what was most important, and nobody was really paying attention to cloud. They weren't paying attention to applications. They weren't doing any of that exciting work that really drew me into IT. They were focused on network and security, making sure that their team could make this rapid overhaul from in office to remote work overnight. And that's kind of what led to our evolution. We're focused in that as of today. So since 2020 to now, that's been our bread and butter. We help public sector entities, healthcare, education, as well as some private sector entities to support secure network connectivity, cybersecurity operations and responsiveness, as well as supporting development of applications as well as websites. But our focus pretty much every day is just helping our customers to keep the lights on and supporting that critical infrastructure for them.
Incredible. And what a unique journey from law school to IT leader without the technical background. Um,
Yeah. Every
Phenomenal.
now and again, it's a little bit difficult, but I think our space changes so much that everybody gets confused at some point. So I'm not really alone, and I'm not an expert in this or I'm not an expert in that. There's no way everybody's going to be an expert in everything in our space. It's too fluid.
100%. And when you think you've mastered something, it changes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so fun. Every day is a different challenge for sure.
Yeah.
So, if you had a magic wand to fix one thing that's slowing your organization down, what do you think that would be?
What's slowing us down? I would say that our growth has really been exponential so we're a family owned business. As I mentioned, my mother and father own their own business from 93 to 2007 or 2008. My mother is an industry veteran. She stayed in this space and she actually came on board with us late 2022, early 2023. And since she came on board, we've actually grown exponentially since then. I'm obviously bringing a book of business, but also her knowledge and her understanding. I think the thing that maybe if in a perfect world, if we could replicate, is being able to replicate our best people. So for her on the sales side, our CTO, who is just a phenomenally creative person and a really diligent problem solver. I think being able to replicate those minds, being able to take what it is they do really well every single day. If there was a way to kind of multiply them and turn them from one person into three people, that would probably just further accelerate our growth. But as we look at, we talk about AI and the different things that you can do with it. You talk about your platform and the different ways that you can support growth. That's really what we're trying to figure out. Like, how can we use technology, whether it's AI or something else, but how can we use technology to really amplify the impact of the people that we have with us and those most critical people who do so much for our organizations?
Yeah, spot on. And unfortunately, cloning hasn't been something that has come to prime time just yet. Um,
Yeah, I watch too many sci-fi movies to think. I don't think I would do cloning if I could. I think I'd stick to AI if we can, kind of find a way to use that. I'd stay away from the cloning. No, that one scares me.
You and me both. You and me both. So, is there any area of focus from a growth standpoint that you're trying to lean into? I know you do spend a lot of time in the private sector. Are you looking in the network connectivity and cybersecurity? Is there an area that you're trying to pivot and expand into? Are you doubling down and just trying to grow? What the kind of foundation that you've already built? Curious.
So I mean, broadly, you always want to be hyper focused on sales. I know that because we work in IT, it's easy to say that we need to focus on the technology, but generally speaking, your customers are not making a purchase because your technology is so special compared to someone else's. There are very few technologies that are just truly transformative to the point that nobody else has anything similar. A lot of times it's just trying to understand the challenges that your customer has, whether it's a personnel issue, a budget issue, or just, the last couple of times they've tried it, the sales group that they worked with just didn't really take care of them or listen to them the way they should have. Our focus mostly is public sector, but I would say we do want to diversify into private sector more. We've been doing that quite a bit from 2024 into now. I think we've made really good progress trying to diversify, but it's been one of those things where it can be challenging at times to pull your team away from what they know best. Fortunately, when you have talented engineers, especially if they have a diverse background, even if it's not a specific sector, let's say manufacturing or something, and they haven't done a ton of work in manufacturing, they can adapt and adjust to it. But I would say probably just staying focused on sales, trying to find new opportunities and new ways to build those relationships. That's, in our opinion, the best way forward to try to continue to grow those sales. As much as technology is critical and important, the relationship is more important. Jillian,
Spot on.
apologies, Jillian.
So IT, I know, can get pretty complicated and relatively intimidating to folks that are unfamiliar with the lingo or where to look. So, what do you think is the biggest kind of differentiator for you and your team? I think we've leaned a little bit onto the personal development and the relationship, but any specific approach that you find is successful with kind of simplifying that decision making process or navigating the complexity of the IT space?
I think it kind of depends on the problem or the solution. There are some challenges that a customer has that are just going to be complex, and you're just going to have to be really patient and try to make sure you understand all the pieces to it. There are a lot of times where, especially when you're dealing with a customer who has, let's look, for example, at a customer who's maybe a Cisco shop or a Fortinet shop. We work with a lot of those customers. They know that environment. They've been, they've purchased that product before. They've had that in their environment for, say, 5 years, and they're looking at maybe doing a refresh. There can be complexity, especially as post COVID, we've seen a lot of manufacturers kill certain product lines. Some of that was related to the supply chain challenges that came up in 2021. So rather than trying to fill massive back orders that they had, they just killed a product line and then brought in an alternate and then gave every customer that replacement item, that replacement hardware, equivalent hardware. In those situations, what you were trying to navigate was really logistics. It wasn't complexity because the technology was difficult. There could be some challenges related to that. Maybe this new technology does not. There could be configuration challenges. Maybe it's not managed in exactly the same way that the last item that you had was, as you went from an older model to a newer model. But I think you really have to respond to the situation. And I'll reference my mother, Viv Gordon. Again, if anybody in probably the Southeast has probably heard her name at least once. And manufacturer partners, particularly like an Aruba, Dream, and Fortinet, have probably worked with her most. During 2021 and 2022, her biggest battles every single day were managing contract vehicles because you had a lot of manufacturers that were raising their prices, which is something that a lot of people did during COVID. And that, that was a big challenge. And also really sucked telling your customer, hey, this item that you paid, $2,000 for last year is now $2,500 and you're ordering 20 of them. You take that into account now when you expected it to be 40K, now it's 50K. But the big challenge you had was, in any state and at the federal level, there are always contract vehicles that are used. Those contract vehicles, if a customer is using that, have preset pricing on it. So you have a do not exceed price or a price ceiling. If the do not exceed price for a particular item is, say, $1,000, you cannot raise your price to $2,000 and then give the same discount you gave before, because now that new discounted price is going to be above your price ceiling. So fighting those battles with the manufacturers to make sure that they stayed in compliance with what it is they previously gave a state or to a customer in the past. Then the logistical challenges of trying to navigate, how do we get this back ordered item? If this item cannot be fulfilled because it is so back ordered, what is the replacement item that we can use? And then how do we get our customer comfortable with that new replacement item that we've been given, that we have to give them? So I think in trying to navigate the complexity that we see, you really have to understand the situation. I think a lot of times the challenge itself is not going to be the technology. I think a lot of times, because the technology is cool and is often the focus, especially for IT personnel, we tend to forget that the IT is the one piece, but there's 50 other pieces that you have to deal with, whether it's non-technical colleagues that maybe are not a fan of this new expenditure because they don't understand the impact. Sometimes you have team members in an IT department that are slow playing a project because they don't want to learn something new. I had a state that I was working in that was trying to do a large cloud migration, and they had about 3 or 4 members of their team regarding data management that were a part of that cloud migration project that pretty much killed the project for the whole state. The state did things bits and pieces, but their goal was very massive. And because you had a couple of people who did not want to move into AWS, Azure, one of the large cloud providers, they didn't want to make that move. And especially with, they didn't want to make that move. And especially with government, one of the funny things you'll have is you'll have folks who maybe get close to retirement and they don't want to take a risk that something they do gets them maybe in hot water. So you're looking at maybe this person is going to retire in 2 years or 3 years, something like that. They know that if they can just kind of keep things steady for now, they don't have an issue. They don't have to worry about getting on anybody's radar. They don't have a problem as they kind of ride off into the sunset. So you have those different types of challenges, but every industry is going to be different. Every customer is going to be different. And depending on what's going on, like now we have these tariff challenges for anybody that deals with hardware, trying to figure that out. We have a customer that's now being forced to potentially pay an increase. And that's our fight right now. We're going to battle for that customer with that manufacturer. That's a small purchase, but quite frankly, it's just not right. And the customer is going to be purchasing through a federal program that has pre-allocated funding to them. So you can't force a customer that, expected to have, say, $5,000 to pay $6,000 when they made this purchase based on the fact that they have 5,000, you agreed to 5,000. You can't charge them 6. So I know it's a very long-winded way to say that everything is complicated and nothing
Yeah.
is complicated, but it just really depends on the circumstance and the situation. I would say my biggest fights every single day are non-technical.
And very, very interesting. And you bring up a really good point about the politics of both internal, but then also, interestingly enough, the external pressures and budget cycles and, that goes into the space that you're really focused in on. Can you shed some light into maybe the impacts of that on your business?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times we look at government as changing slowly, and that is a reality, but government kind of changes at warp speed in these chunks. So as a new administration comes in, new leadership comes in, of course, at the federal level, we see the changes that President Trump has made, speaking about tariffs and different initiatives that he's laid down, kind of blanket initiatives across public sector. But within a state, within a city, within a county, those same things apply. So during your election season, if you have a new mayor come in, as a salesperson, you're saying, oh, okay, well, our customer has decided that they want to go with this particular project. More than likely, it's going to go through. There's a new mayor that could come in, or the mayor that you think is going to win maybe doesn't. That can change everything. That new mayor has a new vision. That new mayor wants to do things a certain way, especially when you look at larger cities or mid-sized cities that kind of want to take that jump, at least in perception, and being seen as a larger city, a more innovative city. You have a project maybe that's focused on cybersecurity. Maybe this new mayor wants to focus on smart cities initiatives. Maybe they want to do more things around, like scooters on the street and, these interactive kiosks that, people can interact with, because that's the type of thing that for a mayor or maybe even a city manager that they're going to be able to kind of hang their hat on as these are the things that I've gotten done. A lot of the challenges that you have with IT is that IT is in the background. And if you don't have an IT leader who is a really great salesperson within their organization, it can be very hard for them to get their projects completed. I mentioned to you that we have a conference called Fades September 15th, where we're going to have a partner that we work with, Meter, that is a network solution. They do managed networking and help to make secure networking easier for customers. One of our customers, though, is going to be speaking at that event as well. And he is probably considered within his area one of the best salespeople and advocates for his IT department. He is one of the best people at being able to explain to non-technical staff why the work he's doing within his department is so critical to supporting HR, instructional technology, or the superintendent has particular academic goals. These are the things that we need to do from an IT department's perspective to help you to get there. But these are the things that we would like to have in order to help us to help you. So I think a lot of times you're seeing all of the forces from the outside, but it's still our responsibility, whether it's myself as a salesperson and somebody should be an advocate and an ally to my customer, or the customer that's themselves that needs to figure out how to adjust their talking points to make sure they stay in alignment with the goals and the priorities of those non-technical leaders that are still so important to the work that we do every day. Whether that's the president, whether that's the governor, whether that's a city manager, the mayor, whoever that might be, county administrator, whoever that might be, the non-technical leaders are often setting the overall organizational goal, just like in the private sector, your CEO, your CRO, whoever that might be. But it's our job as the IT team to make sure that we are aligning what's important for us and what's important for the organization to these visions and goals and values that may shift and change over time. So I would say that some things are difficult to navigate, like the tariff concern. It's raising prices. It's just what you have to deal with. But there are other things where, as a priority changes or as a talking point changes, how do we make sure that the things that we do every day, like cybersecurity, which is so much more important and so much more top of mind as everybody feels like there's a massive breach like every week. How do we make sure that this important is tied to this new initiative? Because there's always a way to connect it. It's so important. There's no way that it's not connected to this new initiative. You may not see it on the surface, but it's there somewhere.
Yeah. Now, do you find you spend a lot of your time actually coaching your own clients on those talking points and kind of like that sales process internally to help, or advocacy, I should say? I mean,
Mhm.
do you,
Yeah. I think it's fine to call it sales. I think because of bad salespeople, sales gets a dirty word.
yeah,
So
I
you
agree.
prefer to say advocate instead of salesperson. But can't remember the guy's name. I think it's something pink, something like everybody's selling or you're always selling, something like that. And he lays out like why everybody's a salesperson. No matter what it is that you do, no matter what your job is. If you're good at what you do, you're probably selling. If you're good in interviews, you're good at selling yourself. So, but I think getting customers comfortable with the idea of you have to find a way to sell your leadership, your colleagues on why there's value for this and also why this helps them. Because most people who are not technical are not looking at the fact that when we come in the morning, we can connect to our email. That's because the network is working properly and you're safe
Mhm.
and secure. If you don't have your reliable connectivity and reliable security, you're not going to be able to connect to to your email. So, being able to tell that story is incredibly important. And I think we don't necessarily coach our customers because depending on the customer, that can be a little bit tricky. Some customers may not like being coached, especially being coached on how to sell their solution internally. Some folks will ask for it. They'll ask, hey, can you give me some talking points? I put together documents for customers so that they can just take that and pass it along, especially if it's something that is coming from maybe a number two or number three within the IT department. And then it has to be passed up. And then from there, it has to be sold. And then it has to be passed up. So you definitely want to have things that are more tangible because technology is very intangible. Whether you're talking about AI, applications, even a website, you can look at it, but how many people know what goes on in the background of a website to make your website look the way it does? Even like color codes. How many people know what these color codes are? Like I barely understand it. But I think a lot of times our job is to make sure that we have understood the customer's problem well enough that we can retell their story to them in a way that then they can tell their story within the organization. So like one of the challenges that we see in the state of Florida is the state's Doge initiative has changed a lot of things as far as priorities across the state. We're seeing some customers that are going through maybe reviews or preparing for reviews. I actually don't think, yeah, we're fortunate. I don't think any of our customers are currently going through review, but we have customers who are preparing for a review. So one of the things that we've done is we put together a document that lays out, we call it the Doge alignment document. So we are making sure that at least for the big initiatives that we've done with the customer, at least even things that they've talked about with us, this is how this particular solution aligns with the dual purposes of this Doge initiative. The Florida Doge initiative under Governor DeSantis aims to improve or ensure the efficiency in the use of public funds. And then secondly, to ensure that we are improving our delivery of public services from a public sector or government perspective. So when we put that document together, we're going point by point and at least giving three, but ideally like to stay at five for how this is an efficient use of public funds. So you can prove that it's an efficient use of public funds, especially if we've done our job. Either we've had a bake off and allowed you to see multiple solutions so you can compare prices, or we've gotten really, really creative with how we've put this together. And if you're able to find somebody who's cheaper or who's given you a better financing model, feel free, go ahead. But we're pretty certain that we gave you best pricing or best procurement path forward. And then how does this help to improve your delivery of public services? How does this, let's say a website, how does this website allow you to be a smart city? How does this website allow you to engage with customers? Tourism is massive in many parts of Florida. How does this website allow you to engage with those tourists who, yes, are coming to spend money here, but are also, while they're here, effectively your constituents as well, right? How do you do things better using this particular solution? How do you serve that community better using this solution? So you can say it's coaching, but I think a lot of times you really want to focus on making sure that you understand your customer's problem well enough to be able to give them the story that's easy for them to take back into their organization. Because that's really what's probably going to do a good job of selling the solution is if you have the right story, the right narrative, and how this best serves everybody else. Also, the customer is going to be able to remember that better if it's a story that they believe in and that they value.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to volumes about your expertise and really your narrow focus in that private sector in the state of Florida. I mean, these are things and initiatives that your general public probably is not aware of, and your ability to exercise this in a kind of a repeatable fashion really just lends itself to how successful you guys are in helping your clients. That is truly impressive. Shifting a little bit, only because it's obviously the hot topic of today, but impacts of AI on the your client's background and really frankly on your business too. Maybe you can expand on your thoughts around there.
You want to start with the good or the bad?
Ooh, dealer's choice. Let's start with the bad.
All right. So AI has created probably two big concerns. The biggest one being security, which is very tangible. Well, let me not say tangible. It's very easy to explain what the security concern would be caused by AI. The second one is compliance. And we're still trying to figure out exactly what that means. So we're going to be organizing an AI panel event, and it's going to be both for technologists. One half of the day will be for technologists. The second half of the day is going to be for legal and compliance officers. So attorneys in the area, some of them that may just want to get training and see what AI is. They hear a lot about it, but maybe don't work with it every day. But also those, a city attorney or an attorney for an organization or a compliance officer to understand some of the safe and unsafe uses of AI. One of the big challenges you have, like if you're in your email on Outlook, Microsoft has Copilot. It's embedded into your email. Google in their G Suite and Gmail, it's embedded into the email. They have these AI engines that are working real time every single day, basically scouring your emails to help you, but you also don't give it permission and tell it what is stuff you want it to look at and what is stuff you don't want it to look at. So, what are the concerns that we have about this? Basically, you can say it's managed, but because it's learning so fast, it's kind of hard to regulate it. So, you don't really want to regulate it because you want it to continue to learn so that way it gets better. So, you could kind of say it's a quasi unregulated entity that could be looking at, say, my dad sent me some of his medical information recently because he had a procedure. He sent that to me through Gmail. Gmail's AI engine can now look at his medical records without any of his consent. Technically, we gave it consent because we're still using it. We all implicitly agree to the terms and conditions. The other challenge you have is that for some folks, you have their employees that are putting, especially if you're a government entity or if you're in healthcare, if you're putting any sensitive client or customer data into that engine because you want to see if it can just pull out, do some math on this for me or whatever it might be, do you know that that's a good place for you to use that data? Should that data be put into ChatGPT or Gemini or whoever it is? So that's kind of the compliance wilderness that I think a lot of people are in. There's no way for us to know in the next like 3 to 5 years what the right answer is, but we know what a lot of the concerns are. From a security perspective, bad actors have access to AI just like the rest of us. I mentioned an email security event that we're going to be doing. I think I mentioned it offline, but we're doing an email security event September 25th with a company called Scales. Their goal is to leverage AI within email security to try to help you to combat the bad actors who are using AI to try to get you. So we've seen an increase in invoice fraud, particularly for government entities, cities, counties, and schools. They have to make all of their construction events public. Bad actors can just look through the internet, usually just come with a bot, pull down any construction events that are going on for any government entity in the US, and then send out fake invoices. No attempt to compromise your or engage in some ransomware event. Just send out clean invoices that happen to ask you to send a check to your actual construction vendor, but to their address. So we've seen cities and counties and school districts that have lost millions of dollars through this, something that seems so simple. But through AI, you can build a relationship with somebody in procurement or build a relationship with somebody in, city administration, because now you're having this bot that is really good at looking like a human. And this person, this real person on the other end has no idea. And because you're not starting out asking for money, because you're not starting out trying to compromise them, you're over the course of, say, 2 or 3 months slowly building a relationship with Tim or Tammy in procurement, whoever it is. And now when you actually do send your fake invoice, now you got 50,000 or 100,000 or $1 million that has just gotten sent out to you because they trust this bot that they think is a human. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing from AI today. I think the good things about AI, we've already had a lot of, I guess you'd better say machine learning. We've had machine learning that's been embedded in especially critical aspects of server operations, network operations, and cybersecurity operations. It'd be almost impossible, especially with cybersecurity, to be as responsive as a lot of customers want their solutions to be without AI or machine learning. That's going to work on weekends. It's going to work in the middle of the night. It's also going to notice things that you may not notice, like iron scales. Their platform is designed to look for the uncommon criteria, like, is this person, impersonating Tim, sending you an email from maybe an email address that is slightly off, or sending you an email on a schedule that Tim never works on or Jim never works on, right? Jim is supposed to be on vacation, or Jim is supposed to be working, but for some reason it looks like he's on vacation in Dubai, right? That's a red flag, but I'm not going to know that. I'm not going to know that this person has compromised Jim's account and this person is in the Middle East or in Asia or in South America. Excuse me. So I think that's one of the big benefits of AI. We've had access to that within a lot of aspects of IT for quite a while through machine learning or some other way you want to classify that. But I think as it continues to grow and continues to expand, yes, we're going to have a lot of challenges and concerns, particularly from how bad actors are using AI against us. But I think we're also seeing a lot of efforts to improve our defense methodology and our defense resources by leveraging AI or machine learning to help.
Yeah, so it's a balance between the good
I
and
would say
the
it's not balanced yet. We're still reacting. We're still reacting, but I think we're making a good attempt. But yeah, it can get scary when you see some of the stuff that the bad actors are able to do with AI. They're very good at using the tools available to them to try to go after some of our customers. It is tough.
that's insane. Oh, and I could see how people would fall victim of it. As they're developing personal relationship and what seems
Mhm,
like real tangible things that you would have in your everyday workflow, and there's just
mhm.
something slightly off about it that, the human eye or, human wouldn't be able to identify. Are you doing anything outside of that, the email scanning, and the event, that you have coming up? Is there anything else or any other way that, you are addressing some of these kind of bad actors or concerns from a cybersecurity perspective?
So I think the industry standard has become defense in depth. It's the principle that if you have as many layers as possible, you kind of create as many potential tripwires as possible. Hopefully they keep people out, but more than likely if somebody gets in, you want to try to get as much advance notice as you can to try to stop them from where they're at and hopefully prevent them from getting to either a critical application or to the data that you're, trying to protect. There's no way to guarantee that anything that we do is going to keep a customer safe. Our space changes too much and too quickly. I would never pretend that I'm going to be smarter than a bad actor. I will always say a bad actor is smarter than me, which is why I'm incredibly cautious and why I advise my customers to be incredibly cautious. A lot of the challenges that you have within security, though, while some of it can be related to the technology, when we talk about relationships and, storytelling within an organization, all these things, it's always about people. No matter how technical things get, your biggest concern or your biggest benefit is going to be a person, whether they're helping you or doing something sloppily that's going to hurt you. And we're seeing that same thing when it comes to email security, especially email security, because everybody has an email account. You can put all these protections in place, but if somebody clicks on an email or sends out an invoice and approves an invoice when they shouldn't have, there's nothing you can really do about that. You can have the best security system in the world. You can have pit bulls in the front yard. You can have, a small country's military that is roaming the grounds. But if you leave your window open, in the back of the house that nobody's looking for, what difference does it make? So I think that's the biggest thing is that, we've always preached, be cautious, educate your team, work hard to make sure they all know how serious this is. But now with the availability of AI for everybody and the ways that it can be used to really successfully impersonate a person, everybody just has to be more cautious. Everybody has to be a little bit more patient, take a little bit more time, and don't just rush to conclusions that because this sounds like a person and because I see, you know, Joe Smith or John Smith and their image, some people put their picture in their email. Just because I see all that does not mean that's who I think it is. So just more caution, more patience, take more time. Again, looking at a platform like Iron Scales, they try to take, live email attacks, sanitize them, and then pump them back out as cyber awareness training resources. So that type of stuff is a way that I think manufacturers are trying to be more helpful, trying to be proactive and making sure that people are ready and prepared for this. But the only thing you can kind of do is try to scare people every once in a while, but you don't want to do it too much because then it loses its impact. There's always like this balancing act or this fine line between like hammering something home and just kind of like having maybe some quiet resources in the background that kind of fill some gaps.
Yeah. So, I mean, awareness and the people breakdown, you're not going to be able to replace,
Yeah.
fortunately, that piece. So, I mean, do you, but there are some things in the back end that you can do from a segmentation or, access lists or those types of things. I would assume
Yeah,
you're,
absolutely. I mean,
continuing to do that.
yeah, and that's where like the partner I mentioned, Meter, that we're going to be speaking with at Fades, that's kind of how they present their solution is like microsegmentation, zero trust out of the box, that type of thing. So you want to definitely make sure that you're building your network and your infrastructure in a way that kind of, again, like Defense in Depth builds those tripwires, limiting everybody's access. I think it was like 2019, I did a small speaking event for some schools and there was a report that came out. I think it was done by USF, which is University in Tampa, for those who may not know. But I think they did some research that showed for school districts, a lot of schools just gave blanket access to every single member of their staff to all student records. So if one person, let's say that works at the front desk, had their account compromised, they would have access to Johnny, Timmy, Gina's medical records, their social security. If their parents had a credit card on file to pay for school lunch, all of that stuff would be available. So trying to make sure you're limiting what each person has access to, why different groups of employees have access to certain things. If you do have to grant access, making sure that you're pulling that access back, it's temporary. Target got breached that way years ago. They were breached through an HVAC technician that was compromised, and for some reason they gave the HVAC technician or the HVAC company some type of account access or user access that was supposed to be temporary but was never so those types of things are really just essential basic things to do now. We still see some folks who don't have adequate segmentation in their network. The idea or the concept of a flat network, meaning like once you land on the network, you can just see everything in front of you. And that's definitely not best practice anymore. It was maybe a decade ago, but it definitely isn't today. So those are definitely there's definitely room for improvement for some customers, but I think a lot of customers are trying to be more proactive and more cautious. We used to have non-technical folks that, you would hear customers complain about like, yeah, that I want to put multi-factor in or something like that, or, make people at least get a text message to their phone and they have to put the code in to be able to access an account. And, people are fighting us on it. That was very big in the public sector for probably my first 5 years. Now it's not as common to hear that being an issue. Everybody's kind of accepted and adopted that. But you still have some folks that don't want to do it. And again, that's always the challenge is I can put everything in place, but, let's say it's the mayor of this city or our CEO doesn't want to do this. Do I want to have that fight? I mean, I can, but do I want it? So that's one of those things.
Pick and choose your battles, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, you've mentioned a couple of times, a couple of events and speaking engagements and in areas that our audience and those in the greater state of Florida can learn a little bit more about you and what DOF is doing as an organization. Can you give us a little bit more detail on where we can attend some of those or how we might be able to participate?
Absolutely. The 17th, September 17th, is going to be an event called Fades. It's a big conference in the state of Florida. We'll be a co-speaker with Meter Networks that I mentioned as one of our partners. We'll also be attending there, so feel free to come by. I think it's the 25th. We'll be doing a webinar with Iron Scales. So that's going to be available to anybody who would like to attend. But we always try to make sure that we're active on our social media, active on LinkedIn, especially. Our YouTube has a lot of old content. We're obviously refreshing some of that stuff and creating some new stuff. But we talk a lot about, essential cybersecurity practices, but also funding. If you can find $1 for a customer, I think that's a lot better than asking a customer for $10. So we always try to look for different ways to access dollars for our customers or to help our customers access dollars. There's currently still some stuff that's up in the air as we go through these different federal audits and all that type of stuff. But I think we're starting to kind of see those things settle out a bit, starting to get some answers as to like what type of grant programs and federal programs are going to be expanded or allowed to remain. So we're hopeful that we can also provide that information. But again, our YouTube and our LinkedIn, we're constantly trying to provide those updates to our customers.
Can you give us the specific YouTube channel and website that they can
Yeah,
check out?
absolutely. So we're at dofcreations.com, Delta Oscar Frank Creations.com. You can find us on LinkedIn at DOF Creations, and our YouTube, of course, is at DOF Creations. So if you actually go to our website, we have links to all of those social media platforms there. It's one-stop shopping, so you don't have to go on Google and try to hunt for each one. If you just go to the website, there's always going to be a link to take you to those platforms. Or if you want to go to, I believe it's like our event section and news, we also have links to our YouTube and our events and news section.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Saeed, for your time this afternoon. Certainly a wealth of information, both practical and a little bit scary too. But I hope everybody walked away with learning a little bit from this episode. So that brings us to the end of this episode. This podcast is sponsored by AI Elevate Partners. We help IT and cybersecurity consulting companies. Yeah, we could do that. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So one of the biggest applications that I'm seeing in my own business and practice is around AI when it comes to the customer and employee experience and leveraging different capabilities around that. What are you seeing from, and I spent a lot of time in the private sector. What are you seeing in the public sector as it pertains to customer experience, employee experience, and leveraging AI technology?
I think it's probably the same as what you would see in private sector. Everybody wants things to be faster. Everybody wants to ensure that the customer experience is better. Whether you're private sector or public sector, there's still a way for a customer or an end user to get you a complaint. And that's kind of the thing that everybody's trying to navigate or trying to avoid. The difference I would see between private sector and public sector is that you may not need to work with that private sector entity. So for us, if we don't respond fast enough, maybe they go and buy from someone else or they decide to work with someone else. In government, you're kind of stuck there because if you're paying like a utility bill, you can only pay that utility bill to X city or X county. But they still want to improve on how quickly they're responding. We're also seeing a lot of ways where you're trying to maybe automate response to FAQs, those frequently asked questions, using AI as a way to assist with that. Or we've also seen AI being used to try to augment that customer service staff, that customer engagement staff. So working with them either to give them better responses, to do some of that low end querying or research on their behalf. So that way it's kind of like the AI is just shooting the answer in front of that person on the phone to be able to respond to the end user. But I would say everything is about speed. And I think that's one of the cool things that we do see about AI, especially like as for those of us as non-technical folks, using Chat GPT or something like that, something that I would spend like 2 hours, like, how do I write this? How do I want it to sound? And put it in Chat GPT, get something back in like 2 minutes, and then I'll spend like 10 minutes tweaking it and making it my own. And I think we're seeing the same thing from that customer engagement, service perspective. How do we make this engagement faster? How do we get better outcomes, faster responses, and also accurate responses
Right.
from our people to our customers or our end users?
Yeah, agreed. And what I think is one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing is the adoption
Mhm.
and the kind of use of AI from an employee standpoint. And how do you leverage it to efficiently kind of eliminate some of the burden, the workload that the employee would actually have?
Yeah.
Are you seeing any specific tools that the government sector is leaning towards more than others, or areas that people are focusing in?
I can't say for sure. I know that there are a lot of new platforms, especially some of the larger government entities, like your larger cities, your larger counties. Those that have larger communities that they serve, they're kind of leading that experimentation. They're trying to be more innovative. So they're looking at a lot of different things. You also have some platforms like say ServiceNow or something that does like ticketing for help desk that they're starting to leverage or incorporate different AI resources. And there's experimentation and testing about, how is this going to help, say, your internal users, your internal staff to send questions for assistance to the IT team in house. So we're seeing some of those things, but I would say we're probably seeing more experimentation. At least from what I'm hearing from customers and from those I'm speaking to, we're seeing and hearing more experimentation, more willingness to try something different. And then I would say like a single partner that we've seen kind of like corner the market, at least in our part of the world.
Yeah. Now, given some of the limitation from the contract vehicles and budgeting cycles and those kind of things, at least my limited exposure and worldview of the public sector would kind of eliminate some of more of those new and innovative, maybe just like startup type technologies. So how does some space that would be trying to consult and help a client to evaluate different AI products address that with somebody in the public sector that might not have the ability to procure something because it's not on a government procurement vehicle? Or am I
So you can still have the public bid process. Customers try to avoid the public bid process because it just adds like 3 to 5 months depending on what happens, and then you cannot protest the bids and stuff like that. Which usually, if like somebody like us doesn't win, they'll get upset and say like, "Oh, well, something was wrong with it." It's just like, "Well, you didn't respond in time, or your response was bad." I actually just got a notice about a public records request, including like a bid that we did because someone's protesting it. It's like, all right, well, just let everything out, and then when they see it was their fault, that's no biggie. But you can still go through the bid process. Something that's been done at the federal level, and I think more people are copying it at the state and local level, is the gratis process. So if you give something to a government entity for free, then there's no issue of contract vehicles or anything like that. They're not spending any money. You can always do trial programs. So if you want to do, and this is something that I think we're seeing as well, is that if you want to do like an extended beta or an extended testing phase, and that way you're able to kind of show the customer the value. And then as they plan for that next budget season, this is something that we would like to have. If we want to include it in that next budget season, this is what we're going to have to do. And then you coordinate with the customer to figure out what the best path forward is in that. And if you do have to go out to bid, then the customer knows, look, we're not expecting to have this as a full go live solution for at least 6 months or not until next year. So waiting to go through that bid process was not a problem. And if they lose because someone comes along with a similar solution at a lesser price, then it's a win-win for the city, the county, the school, whoever it might be. So there are always ways forward. I won't give out any secrets to any competitors out there, but there's always a way forward. There are always things that you can do there. And I think there are a lot of vendors out there who try to get creative for government entities because we know government has 1,000 hoops to jump through. If we can just do things in a slightly better way, so instead of 1,000 hoops, it's 999, then that makes our customers' day a little bit easier.
awesome? And thank you for that feedback, and certainly helpful in my own practice.
Absolutely. I don't know if you guys do anything within public sector, but just the ability to kind of improve speed, improve engagement, and also ensure that, customers feel as though, or city and county residents feel as though they're being heard. I don't see it as much happening, but when you call and you have the auto attendant, they say, we'll give you a call back if the wait time is long. Those
Mhm.
types of things, I think we're going to start seeing more and more from government.
Yeah.
You have that to a small extent with some entities, but I don't see that as like a widely used thing. But I think those are different ways where you're kind of taking the private sector approach to client engagement and being responsiveness. I think we're starting to see more and more of that within the public sector space.
Yeah, and I think you talked a little bit about like the Doge efforts from Florida and being able to have an impact on efficiently interacting with your community and the leveraging a lot of AI capabilities even on digital platforms or having access to process how do I submit this application or something like that. I mean, there's some very kind of innovative and unique solutions that we're looking at right now that transform websites into full-blown conversational unique experiences for that
Okay.
user that are really kind of cool, and one that's really drive Combox, that's driving that initiative that I have not seen other vendors in the space doing with their com site
Is it multilingual?
application. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, especially in a
Yeah.
place like Florida, Texas, New York, California, Nevada definitely too, and then a lot of like those southwest states, but especially in a place like Florida, Texas, California, New York, like those big states, the diversity of languages that you have there. Like people look at Texas and they kind of like think Texas and Tex-Mex, but you have African nations, Indian, throughout Texas. Obviously, California is massive. Florida, we have pretty much the entirety of the West Indies in Florida. And then also you have like all of the, I think it's Eastern Bloc throughout like the Tri-County or South Florida. You have a lot of Eastern Bloc country or folks from Eastern Bloc countries that are there as well. So the multilingual resources, particularly for government entities, are really big. I would also say anything, if you guys are doing anything within the government space, I think it's the ADA compliance. ADA compliance is getting a lot more strict. I'm not
Oh,
quite
okay.
sure how we're going to navigate that, but we're trying to figure that out. I have a buddy who works for a government entity, and he was telling me about something that got passed down to him, and it's the standards are getting incredibly tight. And we're just gonna have to figure out how we make sure we help our customers to stay in compliance with that.
Yeah. How so? Like, give me an example of.
It's asking for like near perfect compliance or perfect compliance. And generally you had some wiggle room. So if you were at
Mhm.
like, when you look at a website and you're doing your ADA compliance assessment on a website to ensure, you were looking at like, I think 98, 99% was generally good. But now if
Mhm.
you have to be at 100%, how do we guarantee that? Also, how do we guarantee that we're going to be able to ensure that as changes are made to the website, if you change content, if you put in new content, certain platforms like government heavily uses a resource called Granicus, fairly inflexible platform. How do we make sure that inflexible platforms or some older resources, which a lot of government entities have older resources and older applications, how do we ensure perfect ADA compliance with those various integrations that are kind of challenging to work with and to bring in? That's going to be a difficult process. It's possible that it changes, but I think as of right now, we just kind of have to plan to be perfect, and then hopefully maybe that's kind of like we get that 0.1%. Because if you just have that 0.1% wiggle room, as long as it's something where you remediate quickly, you should be okay. Perfect compliance is always challenging.
Auditing that. I mean, that in and of itself is an issue.
For government, a lot of like, of course, you see like the state and federal audits that are happening now, but for a
Mhm.
lot of government, the audits are lawsuits. Because it's a government entity, everything is public. And that's one of the big challenges that government has. I think when a lot of folks try to work with government entities, they don't appreciate how visible a government entity is. Even if it's a smaller city or a smaller county or smaller school, if you make a mistake as a government entity and people find out about it, it's everywhere. If you
Right.
make a mistake in a private sector entity, you might be able to keep a lid on it. But in government, all it takes is one person finding out and it's everywhere. So the government entities that are run well are hyper cautious and hyper vigilant about anything that could get them in hot water. So when you have a website, a government website that has not gone through any type of reasonable ADA compliance assessments, especially old websites that haven't been updated in a long time, people just send out these lawsuits. It may be a small like 10K, 50K type of thing, which isn't a crazy amount of money, but if you get 10 of those, everything adds up. Lawsuits are really kind of the biggest audit resource that governments have to deal with. Obviously, you'd prefer if it was like, the state auditing you as a government, as a city or a county, because the price is probably going to be cheaper. But if it's a private entity that decides, oh yeah, I see that your website doesn't have, adequate compliance as it relates to person who have vision issues or hearing impairments or something like that, there's probably a lawsuit coming your way.
Now, do you guys help with that audit process? Or not
Uh,
necessarily the audit process, but like the compliance, I should say?
So we have to be very careful, especially how we talk about certain aspects of auditing. I never want to tell a customer that if I give you a passing grade on something, that means you're good to go, because you have entities that are structured to do the vetting, and they've generally made a massive investment in order to have the various certifications required, where a passing grade from them is basically taken into like a court and treated as a passing grade to the court. So we aren't that type of entity. We haven't made that type of investment in any of those things. Our goal, though, is we call them pre-audits. So we try to take our customers through initial audits and initial reviews. Let's say for government entities that have to adhere to CJIS compliance. So if you are a law enforcement entity, or if you support a law enforcement entity like a city or a county that provides technology services to, their local sheriff or their local police or a courthouse, you have CJIS compliance that you have to deal with to ensure that you are effectively securing yourself to ensure the safe and secure access to law enforcement data from the FBI. So we're not going to do an audit, but we can do a pre-audit. So we'll look at what it is you're doing today. And if we're seeing things that are most likely to be a concern on an actual audit that would come from, let's say, your state bureau of investigation or from the FBI itself, because both the state and the federal government kind of like switch off on when they audit different groups. If we catch anything, then we'll walk you through that. If you want us to assist with remediation, then we'll assist. If you want to take it on your own and just do it all yourself. We showed you some of these areas of vulnerability. This is a concern. If you were to actually get audited today, there's a good chance that this is what would come up. Feel free to do that and just close up some of those holes. But we never want to guarantee, if we were to, do an audit and then we give you a passing grade and then you have an issue like 6 months later, I would never convince a customer that I'm going to give you, I'm going to make your life, I'm going to get rid of all your problems. I never want to make that promise to a customer, because as soon as something slips through the cracks, definitely, you set your expectations too high.
Sure. It's a preliminary. It's a practice exam,
Yeah, yeah, and
right?
I think, and especially as it relates to some of these issues of compliance as it relates to technology has been really difficult because you've had a lot of non-technical people who have built out these compliance frameworks. So there are some things that don't necessarily make sense with how the technology works, but on paper it looks cool, or on paper it looks like you can actually
Makes
be
sense.
compliant with this.
Mhm.
So one state, they had a compliance requirement about cyber insurance, but there was no guidance as to what the terms were supposed to be about the cyber insurance. And also there was no additional funding provided as cyber insurance costs were skyrocketing. They were just told you need to have cyber insurance and you need to do it in X time period. And because they got so much pushback and it was kind of challenging for districts to add in, because it was for schools, to add in that extra money into their budget just out of the blue, because it came in, I think, in like the middle of the school year, they had to delay it. They've reworked it quite a bit. But it's one
Yeah.
of those things, like for a government entity, if you're not paying attention to the budgetary impact, especially if it's done mid-budget season, if you're not paying attention to the fact that, the compliance costs of this could create additional costs for, say, an IT department in order to stay in alignment. Your online testing programs for schools are another big one. You have all these requirements about online testing. We still have huge chunks of this country that are very rural and disconnected from a technology perspective. So how do you ensure that this school district or this school campus that struggles with reliable internet connectivity, and struggles to have backup connectivity issues because
Very
they don't
true.
have great carrier coverage in that area, how did they then ensure that they do online testing reliably for their students? That's fine in Miami. That's fine in Tampa, where I live in the Tampa Bay area. We don't have those issues. But if you're in, like, somebody I work with, or, in the panhandle of North Florida, there are huge portions of the panhandle. Anybody that drives through the panhandle, there are going to be certain areas where your phone is just, it's a paperweight.
Right.
So, you go through Tennessee, Georgia, you go into the Midwest, Nebraska, there are just huge chunks where your
Right.
internet is not reliable. So if you have these blanket policies that sound nice, and a lot of people want them because most of the country is living in these areas that are more heavily populated that don't have these issues, that's nice. But then what about all the people who do have to deal with this issue? What happens with them when they have to try to stay in compliance? And maybe the cost isn't crazy, but it's just impossible to do it.
The cost is crazy. I mean, I live in
Yeah,
New
yeah,
York
it can be.
State, but I think people forget that there's an entire state outside of the city and do live in a relatively rural area, and we're faced with very similar challenges as well. So,
Mhm,
the initiatives to have connectivity and reliable connectivity for the school systems. And we're also running into a lot with, hospital systems as well,
mhm,
healthcare networks and access to healthcare resources when they're much more digitally available and not having reliable connectivity. Yeah, these products sound great when we're trying to do more proactive monitoring from a medication standpoint, or
mm,
vitals for some of the aging communities, or those that, had a recent surgery. And, it's, insurance requirements that you're having these, but at your home, you don't have a reliable internet connection to be able to utilize these. And, you know, I think it's a much larger conversation than what everybody wants to focus on, right?
Yeah, I had an ex from West Tennessee. She was from an area called Hardin County, which is a small rural community. And they're one of those communities that still has, I think it was a Hollywood video. Like
I didn't even know they
yeah.
existed.
Well, it's kind of funny. So in those communities, you'll still have a blockbuster, like a standalone blockbuster, a standalone like Hollywood video or whatever it is. Because yeah, it's cool that you can have Netflix, but if my internet's not super reliable, then I'm just sitting there watching the screen buffer for, 10 minutes at a time. I'm just gonna get a DVD player, and if I want to watch a movie, I watch a movie. Or, hopefully a lot of people in that area have a dish. Hopefully the dish is more reliable. But if there's a weather issue and the dish is unreliable, all right, I'll pop a DVD in. Well, I mean, that's kind of the like you didn't realize that there were still blockbusters and
Yeah.
Hollywood videos out there, but there is
Mhm.
a huge chunks of the country that life is different in many different parts. Like we are in almost every way imaginable. We are the most diverse country on the planet. Like from a geographic perspective, from how, different people are living in our country, from the different communities we have. Like most countries that are as diverse as we are, there's just huge chunks that aren't livable. Like I don't know, like portions of Russia that are just too cold for anybody to be there. But in America,
Don't have
there's like
that.
a community of 1,000 people in that place. You forget they're there, but there are people there, and that's kind of the difference is that I think a lot of times we make policy for say 100,000 and forget that the 1,000 person community, they really can't do anything with that. Like,
100%. And I think even you were talking about like the ADA compliance for the websites and, having just that 0.1% of like flexibility when it comes
yeah,
to regulation and compliance and just like even having that little bit of wiggle room, how much that can make a difference for our community,
yeah.
just because of the constraints that they have no control over. I could talk about
And that's
this
all you,
for hours.
yeah. And that's all you can tell a customer, say, I'm not guaranteeing perfection here. This is
Yeah.
what we've, and if there's no way for me to get you to perfection, I'm just going to tell you there's no way for me to get you to perfection. But if that's what you need, then I would suggest you, find somebody else who's going to make that promise. I'm not making that promise.
Right, right. And all you can be is transparent and honest with
Yeah,
them. Here's the best path forward for you. And unfortunately, there's not anything else that we can do. Right.
absolutely.
Love it. Well, thank you, Saeed. Like I said, I could talk about this, it sounds like for hours with you. And certainly your background and, your desire to help maybe the underserved and even what you did in, your college years with the better health and the mental health speaks volumes to you even being able to, conceptualize and think about, some of those underserved communities and how that's going to impact even technology and what you do today. So thank you again. Great conversation. Hopefully everybody, like I said, walked away learning something from this. So it brings us to the end of the episode here. Again, you guys can follow Saeed, check out his YouTube, tidbit of information that you continue to learn from a cybersecurity perspective and our website. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon and be well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Saeed. And thanks, Saeed. That this was great. I certainly walked away learning a significant amount of what you've got going on here.